Welcome into Courtside Seats with Kroeger, a Charlotte Hornets podcast. Here he is, Chris Kroeger.
All right, here we are, episode 26 of our podcast. It's Courtside Seats, Chris Kroeger, and this is going to be fun. I'm excited to talk to this person right here. Been waiting a while. We get to talk to Kristen Ledlow of NBA on TNT, NBA TV as well. Kristen, welcome into the podcast. It's good to talk to you. How are you?
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm good.
So we'll take people behind the curtains a little bit. So we release the podcast every Monday. So by the time people are listening to this, it's already another week. But you had a pretty good assignment last night. Raptors and Warriors up in Toronto. That's not half bad.
Yeah, and what's crazy is after about the first 6 minutes, we thought, well, no Steph Curry in this one, no Draymond Green in this one. The Raptors are currently the best team in the NBA, so I guess if it ends up being a blowout, nobody can really be surprised. But, of course, even without Steph or Draymond, the Warriors still have Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson. And between the two of them, they end up coming back, tying it with less than 10 seconds to go. We go to overtime, so it was spectacular.
And what's so wild is I think we played Toronto, that would have been game 4 of the season. We went up there. It was like a 4-game road trip right out of the gates, and we saw them up close and personal, and they put a number on us. And I remember after the game talking to JB, who was in San Antonio with Kawhi for a number of years, and I said, "What'd you think?" And he said, "Oh, he was great, but yeah, he's not even operating anywhere near 100% right now." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, I'm scared for the rest of the NBA right now."
Yeah, and at least for the rest of the Eastern Conference. That is one of the things that I was talking about with our broadcast crew right after the game ended is, okay, so the Raptors are right now sitting atop of the NBA. I do think they're a team. I think they're one of 4 that would not surprise me to represent the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals. But to think that the Warriors, on the first of a 5-game road trip without 2 of their superstars, one a back-to-back MVP of the NBA, were able to push it to overtime, it almost makes you feel a little discouraged about how far behind the rest of the NBA really is from the Warriors.
No, it's crazy, but you know what? I don't know. I think I'm on an island on this, so I got to be careful because I'm probably within an earshot of Del Curry right now in the building. But I feel like, I don't know, I feel like this is about the time. Like if you look, and I know are they a dynasty yet? Do they need to win 3 in a row? I don't know. Like we could have that debate, right? But like they're dynastic in how they're built, what they've been doing over the last 4 or 5 years. But this is also about that time when you look back at like this happened with Miami with the Big Three. It happened with the Boston Celtics as well. I know they only won 1, but when you look at what they did with Pierce and Garnett and Ray Allen as well, like you get to this end of this run where all the pressure on the outside, like people just expect you to win every night and every championship, and then everybody else, we keep saying, oh, well, the gap is so wide, but then you look at it this year, I'm with you, like I look at 4 teams atop the East that I think I'd love to see them give them a shot. So I don't know, like I'm in the minority, and maybe I'm just hedging my bets, but I feel like they're going to get their best shot that they've ever gotten from somebody else in the NBA Finals at some point this year. And maybe this is the year where, because of all the drama and just like all the taxing nature that happens throughout the course of not only this year, but like the cumulatively, like what's happened the last 3, 4, 5 years, maybe it just doesn't come together this year, right? Like who knows? So I'm excited about that. Like I'm actually excited to see this thing play out all year long.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like Steve Kerr has said in these last couple of weeks that they've never faced adversity during this run.
Yep.
This is the very first that we've seen of any sort of vulnerability within the Warriors, either on or off the court. At any point in the last 4 years, feeling like, you know what, maybe somebody could knock that team off. Of course, the Cavs did actually do it in one miraculous NBA Finals run. But apart from that, that was still a team that won 73 games in one season. So it is, though, interesting to your point that this is the first, I think, real vulnerability that we've seen with the Warriors. Still, though, talent-wise, I do think that there's a big gap between anybody that's even close. I think that even if they were to trot that team out from last night, they could win a championship with Kevin Durant leading the way, with Klay Thompson, with Andre Iguodala, with Sean Livingston. I do think that even the pieces they have on that team from TNT last night, which, of course, by the time people listen to this Monday, last week. I think that's a championship-level team, and they had Stephen Curry and Draymond Green sitting on the bench. So, and also, goodness, we can't even forget, they also had DeMarcus Cousins sitting on the bench. It's like we forget that they're adding, a goodness. I mean, you by all accounts will have 5 all-stars in a starting lineup. I just think as far as talent goes, there's not a team that's close. I do think there are some teams that will be able to give them a run for their money this season, depending on who's healthy and who makes that run in the Eastern Conference at the end. But as far as just sheer talent goes, on paper, of course, we don't play games on paper. Yep. On paper, they're the best in the league, and it's not close. But, of course, if there is any vulnerability right now, if there is an opportunity to catch them perhaps in the bottom half of that Western Conference playoff picture as opposed to the top half of it, and you can steal a couple of games, on your home court if they don't have that advantage, then yeah, it can go really any direction, which is why we play the games. But as far as sheer talent goes on paper, it's just not close in my opinion.
But I do agree with Commissioner Silver, and I know what was this 2 summers ago when he spoke to Michelle Beadle, I believe, during the finals on ESPN, and he said, the Warriors are, because at that time was the whole conversation, right? Are the Warriors good for the NBA or are they bad for the NBA? And Adam Silver got up on the halftime set on ESPN with Beadle and said, no, they're good for our league because they put, competition sets a bar, and the way we're driven in this league, everybody wants to go chase what's at the top. And I think he got a lot of grief at the time, and people said, oh, that's just PR speak, and that's just you being a mouthpiece for your league. But I think if you fast forward over the last couple of years, I think it's absolutely true, right? Like, look what Philadelphia did. They took a calculated risk a couple weeks ago with Jimmy Butler. The early returns are good. Look at what Boston's been building, but they clearly got to figure some stuff out with where they're at right now. Look at what Milwaukee's been doing. Look at what Minnesota did just a couple years ago with Butler. It didn't work out, but they took risks. So, I look at Toronto with Kawhi, obviously. So, I just look at all the teams atop the NBA right now, and I think that is either directly or indirectly related to what the Warriors have built. And so that is good for our league, right? Like, they have ultimately been good for our league because other teams are trying to track them and chase them down right now.
Yeah, because you don't see other teams cowering or necessarily saying, you know what, right now is the Warriors' time, so let's tank and rebuild.
Right.
I mean, you see other teams essentially either building using the Warriors' recipe or trying to beat them in a way that perhaps the Warriors can't compete. Mm-hmm. I don't know exactly what way that might be, especially now that even trying to take advantage inside or slowing down the half-court sets, you're going to be met with DeMarcus Cousins inside. So, again, finding an advantage anywhere over that team is going to be difficult. But it is interesting that we're not seeing any teams cower to thinking this team is a dynasty and there's no interrupting it right now. I think for 2 reasons, it still feels hopeful. One is because the NBA in its entirety has been built on dynasties, on the backs of dynasties. Mm-hmm. We've seen stretches of great Boston Celtics teams, stretches of great Los Angeles Lakers teams. Oh, and right before that, stretches of great Chicago Bulls teams. I mean, and never before did we think, you know what, Michael Jordan and the Bulls weren't good for the NBA. I mean, that was a turning point for the NBA. Mm-hmm. I think that this is a Warriors team that has captured a generation that perhaps may not have paid attention before, that Stephen Curry is the kind of superstar that has captured the attention of children in a way that you don't see a lot of other superstars doing so in the league. LeBron is, of course, a bona fide worldwide star, but the way that Steph and the Warriors are doing things is a little bit different than we've ever seen before. It's hopeful for that reason because the NBA has been built on the backs of dynasties. It's also still hopeful, I think, because of LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. And had they not come back from down 3-1 just a couple of years ago and won an NBA championship, I do think that it would have felt like, well, the Warriors have won 4 in a row at this point. Like, who is possibly competing with them? But because of what we saw LeBron and Kyrie and Kevin pull off in that NBA Finals run, it still feels like, hey, anything may be able to happen here.
Let's ask the real important question here. Were you wearing velvet last night? What was that?
Yeah, and let me tell you, it is not breathable fabric. Not at all.
I thought you were going to say it was comfortable. No, I thought you were going to say it was comfortable. It wasn't comfortable, apparently.
No. Velvet is not at all breathable. And as cold as Toronto is, the arena was heated well, and it was a game that went to overtime. And I had microphone cords and IFB packs strapped inside of that very hot velvet dress.
Oh, no.
So, no, by the end of it, I was sweating like I had played in the overtime game. But it was the most Craig Sager-inspired outfit in my closet. Like, when else in the entire year am I going to wear purple velvet, if not to honor Craig? So I wore it. I loved it. I will not wear it again until perhaps the next time that we decide to whip out our Sager-inspired style.
Well, we're going to wear it. It's Friday while we're taping this, so our whole broadcast crew, the radio crew, even though we're on radio, we're not on TV, we're going to wear some Craig Sager-inspired gear tonight, and I know our TV broadcast is as well. So, I grew up on Sags in as much as, I have such fond memories growing up in Charlotte, and back then the Hornets used to be on so many TNT games on those Thursday nights with, whether it was LJ and Alonzo, and then it turned into, with Glenn Rice and Anthony Mason and Vlade Divac and then Baron Davis and those guys too. So we always had marquee teams, right, that played on those marquee national games. And I just always remember watching Sager so often. And, at the time I never thought sportscasting was something I was going to get into. But when I look back on it now, he had just such an infectious love of the game of basketball and telling the stories, and he did it so well, right, that I think he truly, maybe as well as anybody that's ever been around our game, he captured what the spirit of the NBA is all about, and I think that's why his legacy is so strong, right? That's why it is what it is.
Yeah, and it's so cool because he was so far ahead of his time as far as not just his style, as far as the suits he was wearing, but his broadcasting style as well. Think about how many shows and broadcasts now try to mirror a little bit of what he was bringing on a nightly basis just by being himself. And even sitting there last night thinking about it as we watched some of these somber videos, paying tribute to the legacy that he left. I actually laughed at one point as I was sweating in this velvet purple get-up, like... He would be dying laughing if he thought I wore that in his honor and all night long was sweating and was like, at what point do I get to take this off, And he taught me so many important lessons in the short time that we were able to spend together at TNT, but none more important than being entirely joyful because you get to talk about basketball on TV for a living, which is a pretty cool gig. And also that there's nobody that's going to be me better than I'm going to be me. Like, I'm not going to do a better job, a better version of Doris Burke than Doris Burke is going to do. I'm not going to be a better version of Craig Sager than Craig Sager was. But I can be entirely myself and show up and be all in and be joyful and be excellent. And nobody's going to be a better version of me than I can be. And those are the kind of Sager-inspired lessons that I feel like have changed the course of my career. So putting on a purple velvet, suit to remember his style is one thing. But when I was thinking about it last night, it's like, no, it's not that he just inspired this velvet blazer I have on. He inspired my broadcasting career, my broadcasting style, and being entirely myself. And what a gift that is. And that's the gift that I feel like he brought to the NBA and to all of its broadcasters.
Let's talk about you for a second, okay? So you played basketball and volleyball growing up, right? You played both in college, but was basketball always number one for you?
Yeah, so I actually only started playing volleyball so that I could get out of that first month of basketball conditioning.
Oh, is that okay?
That, to me, nightmarish. And the only way you could get out of it is, of course, if you're busy doing something else.
Sorry, Coach, can't do it.
I've got to play a fall. Yeah, right. No, I've got to play a fall sport because I've got to get out of this. And I had a very tough high school basketball coach, the best, though, and taught me so many life lessons, taught me the game well, but taught me life better. But I did want to get out of his first month's worth of conditioning, without a doubt. So that's why I started playing volleyball. But basketball was my first love. It was because I am as tall as I am. I was about this height by the time I was about 12, but nearly 100 pounds lighter. So picture that. It ain't a pretty picture, but on the basketball court, I felt graceful and I felt natural, and it was something that came very easy to me. It was a language that I spoke well. It was something that that felt worth falling in love with, and it was my very first love and my first and foremost passion. And then when I went to college and started really focusing on my broadcast career, when I decided that I wanted to go into working in basketball full time, I was playing both, but then ended up playing just volleyball first and foremost because of knee injuries, but also because I wanted to be able to focus on broadcasting throughout the basketball season, and so I steered my career in that direction. But without a doubt, basketball was my first and foremost love, and taught me so many lessons about life itself. And when I think about how much time I put into it, from the time I was, I guess, 8 years old, through middle school, through high school, through college, when I think about how much time was put into it and the fact that none of it was wasted because it's now my full-time job, because it changed the course of my career and my life, it's just such a special thing to me. You hear all the time when you're sitting in classes in high school or when you're sitting in classes in college, well, this is something that you're going to use every day in your life, or this is something that you're going to use in your career, this is something that you're going to use before you move on to fill in the blank. Really, for me, the most important lessons that I have used have come from playing basketball, and to think that none of that time was wasted is just such a special thing to me.
What was the first job you had while you were either still in school, whether at FSU or Southeastern, or maybe when you got out of school and you thought, oh my gosh, I've made it? Like, now you look back and you think, man, I didn't know what I was doing. But now at the time you're like, man, this is the greatest job on earth. How awesome is this?
So my freshman year playing basketball, the very first time I was asked to be a basketball analyst was on one of our men's college games, and they tipped off about a half an hour after we wrapped up.
Oh, no.
So I finished playing in the women's game, showered, came out with wet hair, put on a headset, and served as an analyst for the men's game. I remember leaving that game feeling like, I don't think I will ever get better at this job than the job that I just did right there.
Really?
That right there is the height of my greatness, the height of my career. And it's funny because, you go back and you look at your old reels and you look at those old things and oh, goodness, I was not even a little bit good at this job, But I remember feeling like because I was asked to be, an analyst rather than serve in any other capacity, I was asked to be an analyst for the men's game, and I thought, this is as good as it gets, and there have been a lot of little things along the way where I've thought, wow, I don't know that I can top that. But that was the very first time that I felt like this is a forever feeling, like if it doesn't get any better than this is okay.
Has that ever gotten lost? Like, I've been doing this now. I mean, I've been around the Hornets now for a few years, and I've been around pro sports for a while. And I remember, like, the first time I walked into a Panthers practice, for example, and I saw Cam Newton, I thought, you're a giant human being. That's not normal. And so, you know what I mean? So you're wow, you are different. There's a reason why you play quarterback in the NFL. And so, like, you have those moments, but, like, doing this now where I get to go to shoot around and I travel with the team and I'm around these guys and I get to be in some small form a person that shares the stories of our franchise with our fan base, like, and I show up every day, and I show up like today. It's game day, and there's a buzz in the arena, no pun intended, because it's game day.
I was about to say pun. Nice.
Well, pun intended, actually, yeah. So, but has that ever been like last night to you? You show up, huge game, national TV. You've got the marquee assignment in the NBA last night. Like, do you still have those goosebumps of like, I can't believe this is my job right now?
Oh. Without it, always. I mean, listen to me now. I feel speechless even answering your question about the job.
Yeah.
I honestly cannot believe on a regular basis that I got picked to do this. I really can't. Like, I just feel like this huge basketball fan who somehow gets access to the game in a way that I could never have dreamed of. And no, the moments are not lost on me. It's not a job that is wasted on me. It's nothing I ever take for granted. And there are moments throughout every single season where just for a moment I'll pause and it's like, whoa, I just got to talk to LeBron James, after hitting a game winner over the Boston Celtics at TD Garden, I don't think that I'm going to forget this. Not ever, you know? And so to get to be part of these moments is such a special thing. But then sometimes I have those surreal flash forward moments where I'll be watching, like, you know, an old Michael Jordan documentary, and, you know, they show his interviews after the game, and I'm like, wait a second.
That'll be me.
10, 20, 30 years from now, like when my kids are learning about the greatness of LeBron James, the greatness of this Warriors team, and like I'm going to be on that. And no, I mean it's not something that I've ever gotten used to. It's not something I've ever taken for granted, and may it be taken away from me if I ever do, because it is such a spectacular and special position to get to be in, one that is much larger than I ever would have dreamed of, and I feel overwhelmingly thankful all the time.
Well, and I love seeing, like, you. I love such a big fan of, obviously, Doris is as good as it gets. We've got such a fantastic analyst and sideline reporter here locally, and Stephanie Reddy on our broadcast.
I love Stephanie. Yeah.
So, and then you mix in, like, Cassidy's done a great job. So, like, you see, this is the other cool part, I think, is, like, you start to see the growing, you know, herd of women in our league who are taking on more responsibilities and having more prominent voices covering our league. I'm sure for you take huge responsibility in that, right? And being a role model, and for all the girls that are growing up and watching and seeing, you know what, that could be me one day. I could be that person on TV.
Yeah, and it's such a special time, I think, to be a little girl who loves basketball, or to be a woman who wants to work in or around it. Because when I was young, I loved it and looked up and thought there's no real way to make a life out of it, to make a career out of it. And then, of course, there was the conception of the WNBA, and then there was the first female broadcaster, and then the first fill in the blank after fill in the blank after, and these women who trailblazed before me. And you mentioned a woman like Doris Burke. She was the first and the only for so long, and I've told her this on a number of occasions. What's so unique about her is that she wasn't satisfied simply being the first or the only. She made sure that she left the door open for the rest of us who were on our way. And so to think about being part of this wave of women who now let little girls know that it's possible, not just to be a sideline reporter in the NBA, but to be an analyst, to be a play-by-play broadcaster, to be a referee, to be an assistant coach, to hey, soon be a head coach. It's just a very special wave of women to be a part of. It's a unique sisterhood, without a doubt, and I feel very, very fortunate to get to be part of it.
You know what's funny, though, is so I went to my first broadcast meetings this summer up in New York, and I don't get nervous very often, Kristen, but I got nervous because I thought, you know what, I'm the youngest play-by-play guy in the NBA, radio or TV. I'm 31. I'll be 32 in January, and I thought, I just took over for the Steve Martin, the only guy who's ever been the voice of the Hornets for 30 years, and I thought, what are these guys gonna do when they see me, right? When I show up and they think, are they going to think, who's this young kid? What's he doing here? I've never heard of him. Does he earn this? Does he deserve it? And instead, it was the exact opposite. Everybody, to a man, came up to me and said, I am so happy for you. You're going to do such a great job. This is going to be the best thing that's ever happened to your career. This is going to be the last job you ever have. And you know, I could name names of every guy that came up to me in our circle of broadcasters in this league. And I think that kind of sums up our league, right? Our league's very inclusive for the most part. I mean, sure, there are outliers here and there, but everybody wants to help everybody and seems so genuinely invested in growing our game. And I don't sense a lot of that other stuff of like, oh, who are you? You don't belong here. Instead, it's what can I do to help? And we're so glad to have you, right? And that's pretty special.
And I think it's because it takes such a great deal of confidence to get there anyway that nobody's really that concerned about losing any piece of their meal because somebody else just pulled up a seat at the table. And that was one of the things I was blown away by when I first got the job hosting Inside Stuff at NBA TV, that I actually heard from Summer Sanders and Willow Bay, the original hosts of the show, from Ahmad Rashad as well, just not just wishing me luck, but asking me if there was anything that I needed as I took off on this journey. To find out that women like Doris Burke, like Sage Steele, like Michelle Beadle, like Rachel Nichols were not only going to be these idols of mine, but to truly take the time to be mentors and to pour into my life and into my career was an overwhelming thing for me. It's one of those things that, like you said, you step into the door thinking, there's no way that anybody in here thinks that I belong, and when I started then not just hosting inside stuff, but working on the sidelines for TNT, I thought, okay, at the time I was joining David Aldridge, a Hall of Famer, Craig Sager, the same, and Rachel Nichols. And how in the world am I going to add anything to this? And instead of any of them looking at me as if I didn't belong, every single one of them was purposeful about being sure that I not only learned from them anything that I could, but that they sent me off running down my own lane that they weren't going to be running in. And so it's become so important to me in these last couple of seasons, as now I'm still doing that job, but others are coming up behind me, which is kind of crazy, to be purposeful about pouring into them as well, to be purposeful about leaving the door open for those other young women coming up behind me who are going to be, by the way, better at this job and smarter and sharper, which is really a special thing, because there's a wave of women that is the first, and for a long time they were the only, but it's such a cool thing, such a cool sisterhood, and as you mentioned, I mean, it's a brotherhood as well. It's a family, that is so willing to see others succeed, that wants so badly for this product to be great, that no one is really that concerned with who all is sitting at the table, as long as it's done in excellence, as long as it's done together. And it's just goodness to get to be part of it is there isn't the right word. There isn't. I'm blank, but I'm also kind of tired. I left Toronto at about 4 a.m.
Totally valid. Totally valid. We're going to lighten things up before you go, because it's our 30th anniversary, and my entire childhood is just littered with Hornets basketball memories, and so this is really fun for me this year to kind of go back down memory lane. But for you, as somebody that grew up in a similar time frame down in Florida when the Magic were coming around at the same time, they're celebrating their 30th anniversary this year too. What are your random childhood memories of the Charlotte Hornets, Kristen Ledlow?
Oh, goodness. Random childhood memories of the Charlotte Hornets?
Space Jam, right? Because you got Muggsy and LJ in Space Jam. It's got to be Space Jam.
It has to be. I mean, I hate to always bring it back to Space Jam, which is why I want to pause and think about anything else that I remember of the Charlotte Hornets. I actually do remember specifically a young Stephen Curry with Dell.
Yeah.
But that aside, I mean, it always comes back to Space Jam, doesn't it? MJ said it himself, his greatest career accomplishment. But no, I as a kid growing up in Florida, growing up close to the Orlando Magic, and growing up loving the game of basketball, because not only what it was bringing to my life, but I mean, thinking about the possibility of making a life out of it, it really was, I mean, as goofy as it sounds, it really was Space Jam for me that helped me fall in love with not just the game of basketball, but with the culture it had created. And so, yeah, guys like Muggsy Bogues, of course, were, among my favorites, as were Charles Barkley. And of course, Michael Jordan was all-time favorite as a kid. But goodness, I was trying to think of any other Hornets memories so that I didn't immediately go to Space Jam, but I really think it always comes back to Space Jam.
Well, and can I say this? Here's a Space Jam take on the way out the door. Sean Bradley doesn't get enough memory as a star in Space Jam, okay? Why do we never bring up Sean Bradley in Space Jam?
I agree. I have gone on the record to say that Charles Barkley was an Oscar snub in a supporting role, but I don't think that Sean got enough credit. You're exactly right. But true, I mean, neither did Muggsy. Because we think so much about what Michael did, and we were rooting against the guys who played the Monstars, or thought that perhaps the other NBA guys were, they're the stupid ones that lost their powers.
Yes.
They were truly great in it.
It was all great, and now we get to await what'll happen with Space Jam 2 with LeBron. Are you a fan of the idea of this, or no? Or did you want it to just stop after the original Space Jam?
Oh, no, I'm a huge fan of the idea of it. I am making a push to have a cameo in it, even if it means sitting in the arena whenever LeBron takes on the Monstars or
whatever it takes
slot they decide to go into. I don't think there's anybody else that could have done it but LeBron, and if anybody was going to do it, I want it to be LeBron. He's not only, the greatest basketball player of our generation, of this generation, perhaps will end up being the greatest of all time. But he's a great actor also, and he's funny, and he's likable, and he's the perfect one to carry the torch. He's the perfect one to put on a sequel. I hope we hear though that in similar fashion too, since we're going down that rabbit hole. Oh, no pun intended, at Space Jam.
Well done.
We hear. Thank you. We hear those stories of those guys playing pickup while on the set, and they talk about these epic pickup games where guys who weren't even a part of Space Jam would show up to the set on a regular basis, to play against the guys who were already there. I hope that we get some of those, almost like legend has it kind of stories from the Space Jam sequel of guys that are playing pickup, on the set, but we don't ever really get footage of it. So yeah, again, another childhood memory turning into a adulthood reality, which is, I guess, kind of the story of the career that I get to be, that I get to have now, the story of the podcast that we're on right now, and that's all that it is. That's all that it was. And no, I am unbelievably psyched for Space Jam 2. Well,
Kristen, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and hopefully this isn't the last time. Of course, you're going to be able to see Kristen all season long, NBA on NBA TV, NBA on TNT. She had the Thursday night assignment alongside Marv Albert and Chris Webber. Are you kidding me? Up in Toronto for Raptors and Warriors. How great is that? Kristen Ledlow of NBA and on TNT, Turner Sports, and, of course, the host of Inside Stuff. Kristen, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for dropping by and joining us on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me and for taking the time. I appreciate it. I hope to see you down the road soon in Charlotte.
Episode 26 of Courtside Seats, our Charlotte Hornets podcast. Kristen Ledlow, NBA TV, NBA on TNT sideline reporter, dropping by this week. It was good to talk to her about her journey to the NBA, and it was fun watching her just this past week on the TNT broadcast for Raptors and Warriors. Of course, you'll see her all season long. Appreciate her joining us. If you've missed any of our previous episodes of Courtside Seats, you can find us in Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, anywhere you can find podcasts. We're available, YouTube as well, on our Charlotte Hornets YouTube channel. You can find us there, including other great Hornets content. Just search Courtside Seats. You could search Charlotte Hornets as well, or just search my name, Kroeger. All right, we'll catch you guys back here next week with another new edition of Courtside Seats.